Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Great to be at the Emerging Leaders Conference. It's taken me 32 years to get to being an emerging leader. But Helloworld's a business which has been around in various guises for a very long time. And many of you will remember parts of it under different brands and names. The Jet Set Travel World Group, Travel World as a retail agency network, Travel Scene American Express, Harvey World Travel, amongst its brands, Transonic, another one of the businesses that was listed and ultimately joined the Helloworld group as it became in 2013 or 2014. So as Grant's mentioned, and a very big thanks to Grant for all of his support. He's been really very, very supportive over the last few years, and Bell Potter as well. So thanks very much to Bell Potter and to Grant and the team. But I turned up there in 2016. I merged the AOT business, which we started back in 1987. For those of you who can remember back that far, I certainly can't. But started that back in 1987 as a safari tour operator, taking people up Cape York and up around the Gulf of Carpentaria. I realised that wasn't going to pay the bills, particularly over the wet season. So I bought a retail travel agency, became a wholesaler, became an inbound tour operator, and started to form a business which was much more engaged in travel distribution. I once sat down, I remember sitting in a laneway in Port Douglas, sitting on a milk crate, having a beer with a friend of mine who had a tour desk operation there, and he told me that he once worked in a business which had a travel business that had a $6 million turnover. And I remember sitting on that milk crate thinking, God, that's incredible. Imagine having a $6 million turnover, because I had about a $300,000 turnover. Anyway, our TTV in the year just finished was 6.511 billion, and it's a different type of business today than it was many, many years ago. But I've grown up through the industry over the last 32 years, done a lot of things in it. From a retailing perspective, from a wholesaling perspective, from an inbound tour operating perspective, most of my experience prior to joining Helloworld was in the sale of Australian and New Zealand product, through our inbound operations with clients in 72 countries, and also with our operation of Air New Zealand Holidays and a number of other businesses into the outbound markets. So in February 2016, I was able, at the time, we had accumulated a 10.3% stake in Helloworld, and I was able to, in fact, I sat down with Alan Joyce one day. He had 29%. I asked him how he was enjoying his shareholding in Helloworld. He said, probably about as much as you are. Got any ideas? And I said, well, actually, I do. So what that ultimately resulted in was merging AOT into Helloworld, and my wife and I came out of that transaction with 40% of the shares in the company, and I took over as the Chief Executive Officer. As Grant said, it's been an interesting ride over the last few years. We've improved the profitability significantly. We've done a lot to enhance the brand of Helloworld. I mentioned some of those legacy brands that many of you will have heard of. They're all gone. They've gone before I got there. I won't get into whether or not I wouldn't have done that. I can't put that milk back in the bottle, but the company became Helloworld. Unfortunately, most people thought we sold SIM cards or phones, or otherwise we were some sub-franchise of John Laws, or alternatively we were some part of Emirates, which also used the Helloworld symbol. So most people introduced me at conferences, dinners, lunches, wherever. If I was speaking at something, they would say that I ran Helloworld Travel. So it started to become bleedingly obvious that we should probably put the word travel back into the name. So we became Helloworld Travel Limited. And prior to that, my predecessors had spent $80 million, that's $80 million, on going from Harvey World to Helloworld, which wasn't necessarily that clever. Anyway, here we are today. So we had a good year in FY19. I've stated from the go-get, we have an aspirational target, and it's more than aspirational in my executives' eyes because they get rewarded obviously for hitting it, but we have an aspirational target in FY20 of a 25% EBITDA revenue margin. I'm going to talk about in a minute the impact some of the accounting changes have had, the accounting standard changes have had on our statutory profit compared to our management accounts, but I'm not using that as an excuse, so maybe I am as a little bit. But anyway, this year we had revenues of $360 odd million, just under. Had an EBITDA of $77.3 million, which was up 20.8% on the previous year. We're able to declare a final dividend of 12.5 cents a share. We had gone from 11 cents. I didn't want to pay 13 cents a share. My wife's Italian. She's very superstitious. She said you can't pay 13 cents a share dividend, and we didn't want to pay 14 cents, so we paid 12.5. But anyway, we've got 20.5 cents fully franked for the year off an EPS of 31.5. What is our business? What do we do? Well, we sell effectively all of the product that you know and love in the travel industry through a whole range of different distribution channels, right? The product selection is relatively limited. It's airline flights, it's hotel rooms, it's car hire, it's insurance, it's seats on coach tours, it's cruises, anything you can think of in the travel industry around the world, whether that's in Iceland, Ireland, Greenland, etc., we will be selling it and we'll have customers there. We issue and sell over 3.8 million airline tickets a year. We buy, just in Australia alone, nearly 2 million room nights a year. We sell over $1.2 billion a year worth of cruise. And we're selling that through a raft of different channels. Those channels are pretty simply and easily delineated. The first is through a retail agency network that comprises over 2,400 members. Some of them have high street stores, some of them are in the malls, some of them are corporate agents who've got their office, they're upstairs in offices around the country. And in Australia we have 6 networks covering all of our agencies, and in New Zealand we have 4. So the 6 networks in Australia, we have a branded network, Helloworld Travel, the travel professionals. We have an associate network, Burns Travel, part of the Helloworld Travel Group. We have Helloworld Business Travel, 66 corporate agencies doing about $650 million a year in total. We have our My Travel Group, 770 members of the buying group who purchase not all but a lot of their product through us, particularly their airline tickets. We have the MTA Group, which is a broking network, home-based brokers, 440 home-based consultants who'll come to your office or come to your home and sit down and discuss your travel arrangements with you and make bookings for you. And finally, the Magellan Travel Network, which we purchased early last year, which comprises about 130 agents around Australia. So those networks we have here, and in New Zealand we have the branded network, the associate network, the My Travel Group network, and we have our travel broking network as well in New Zealand of these home-based brokers, about 230 of them now. So we're distributing all of that product I talked about earlier through a whole plethora of retail distribution options and corporate distribution options that are part of franchise and buying group networks that we operate. Relatively thin margin from our perspective. We count as our TTV the volumes upon which we at Helloworld Travel Limited get an earn on. We share some of those override commissions and so on and so forth. We share them with our agency networks, but that is around about 40% of our revenues are coming via the clip of the ticket we get on those huge volumes passing through all of those agencies. So that's an external, they're external, what I call external transactional businesses, right? We have our own internal transactional businesses, and they're made up of, firstly, our wholesale and inbound division. We lump those two together, and they run effectively on one platform and under one individual who's the head of both the wholesale and inbound divisions. That's Mrs. Burns. And she has about a $1.2 billion TTV under her. It's the highest margin part of the business, and she has about 1,100 staff working in those divisions. And so what we're doing in those, it's quite distinct, but what we're doing is we're wholesaling product globally from right around the world. We're wholesaling product through those 2,400 agencies that are parts of our group. We're also selling it to about another 1,000 agents who are not part of our group in Australia or New Zealand. So we have a number of brands: Qantas Holidays, Viva Holidays, Go Holidays in New Zealand, Cruise Team, Ready Rooms, Seven Oceans Cruises, Asia Escape Holidays, etc., that we're pushing product out through the retail distribution network. It's our, as I said, it's our highest margin product, and within that we have an inbound division as well. What's that doing? It's making travel arrangements for people coming to Australia from 72 countries around the world. We have clients in Kazakhstan, clients really in most countries that have got people who are obviously able to afford to come to Australia. We have clients. We're the largest handler of Brits into Australia, we're the largest handler of Italian visitors into Australia, the largest handler of German travellers into Australia, and in many cases New Zealand as well, and in Fiji. So that inbound division turns over about $200 million. It's actually got the highest margin of any of our businesses. So if somebody came along to me and said, listen, you can have an extra $10 million in TTV, Andrew, into any one of the businesses that you've got. Which one do you want it in? I'm going to take it in inbound any day because it's going to deliver $1.4 million in revenue to us. That $200 million generates $28 million in gross revenues for us. If I wanted to get the same sort of gross revenues out of our retail business, I'd need $900 million extra of retail revenue. All right? I make that point for two reasons. The first is obviously to illustrate that we've got some businesses obviously with very different margin outcomes. And lots of people get fascinated by our retail business. They want to know if we've got a new retail store, new retail shops, if we increased our retail footprint. No one seems to ask too much about the inbound side of the business. I don't get too many questions about the wholesale side of the business, but I get lots of them around the corporate business and the retail business. But our wholesale and our inbound businesses are very, very important to us. And I want to point that out because it really does as well, I think, highlight the different nature of the types of distribution we undertake and the different nature of the commercial outcomes that they generate. Our corporate business, I talked about our external transactional businesses and including Helloworld Business Travel, 650 million in TTV, 66 members. We also have our own corporate TMC business as well. QBT in Australia, APX in New Zealand. Sitting within our corporate division, we also have Show Travel, which we purchased on the 17th of December last year, which specialises in the entertainment industry and does a lot of work in film, television, theatre. With three major productions of Warner Brothers going on at the moment. We're shifting people all over the country, particularly from the Gold Coast where the Warner Brothers Movie World studios are, out to various locations around the country. We do all of the logistics for that, and we also have 35 semi-trailers that cart the stuff around, which I didn't have on the 16th of December, but I do now. We also have 55 coaches on the road in Fiji as well, which is just another little part of the business that keeps us up at night sometimes. But anyway, the corporate business is a very important part of our business. AOT Hotels is also a part of that business, and that's the official provider of hotel accommodation to the Commonwealth Government. I want to talk about, and I've talked about it earlier in the year, I'll talk about it again, although I hate raising the point over and over, but I will do it anyway because it's painful. But I did get a bit of a smacking from the Labor Party. And I stepped down on the 30th of June after 4 years and 2 victories as the Federal Treasurer of the Liberal Party. As they say, you don't get to choose the battleground on which you have to fight. You have to fight the fight that confronts you, but it's no mistake if you win. And we were fortunate enough, I think, and most people in the room I hope would agree with that we were fortunate enough to win that battle. But I managed to put myself in the political firing line and got smacked for doing 2 things, or not doing 2 things as a matter of fact. The first thing I got smacked for was for my PA not charging Matthias Cormann for 4 tickets to Singapore. Some of you may remember that. And the second thing we got smacked for was for Russell Carstensen, a former employee of the company, going to meet with Joe Hockey, the Australian ambassador to the United States, in relation to providing travel services to the DFAT consulates up in the US. Which was hardly surprising that we would do that, given that we have the contract for the entire Commonwealth Government and 179 different divisions, departments and agencies. But anyway, Russell got a bit disgruntled and quit one day and decided that he'd make a few stories up, and away he went. And of course the Labor Party took that into Senate estimates and a whole lot of rubbish produced around that. I'm pleased to say we've moved on from that. Didn't do much for our share price, I can tell you. And for those of you who've got our shares, you know that, and I apologise for what did happen. But I don't apologise for obviously taking on that role, for which I had 3 Prime Ministers, 3 Treasurers, 3 Federal Directors and 2 party presidents. But at the same time I managed to fix Helloworld up pretty much along the way. But can I say that our relationship with the Commonwealth Government and particularly with the Department of Finance is very strong. We have a very good reputation throughout the Commonwealth. It's a 4-year contract. I had nothing to do with it when it was won. It's got 3 one-year extensions in it that could be exercised either simultaneously or individually. The Department of Finance has exercised 2 of those years, so we have that contract now through to the 30th of June 2021, and we have a 93.5% approval rating from users of the service right across the public service, which is extremely high, the highest it's ever been. And we would anticipate that the further 1 year gets added on, and obviously we would hope to be successful in re-tendering for it in 2022 for the new tender that will kick off on the 1st of July 2022. So anyway, I did want to just touch on that because hopefully most people have forgotten that story and you'll forget it again when you leave here this afternoon, but it did cause us a bit of angst earlier in the year. So I'm just going to flick on a couple of slides here and just illustrate some of the points. The forward arrow's been completely wiped out. So they're the basic key metrics, and many of you will have seen this already, so I won't I certainly won't read it out, but I won't talk too much to it. And you can see things cheerfully improved again. That's our networks in Australia. I talked about those 6 networks and 2,447 members at the 30th of June in Australia and New Zealand. So that was good. Expansion in retail, particularly in New Zealand. And one of the things I do want to highlight, and I've talked about it for a couple of years, New Zealand was an underperformer for us. It was an underperformer for a number of reasons. One, it had too much cost in it. Our first primary focus when we got into the business was to look at the costs in Australia. And we worked quite hard on that to make sure we were right-sizing the things that we were doing. But we really focused on New Zealand over the last 18 months. And the team's done a magnificent job over there. And most particularly, they've got their EBITDA to revenue margin up to 19.6%. From 12.4 or 12.5% the previous year, and single digits prior to that. So they've managed their costs carefully and they've scaled up. So that's been a very, very good outcome. And I think we'll continue to see growth in that in the year ahead. Increased retail brand presence. I'm sure that all of you are glued to your television screens at 4:30 every Sunday to watch our Helloworld television show. You can see Ray Martin there. Actually, we've shifted that show to Channel 7 this year. Why? Because I can't stand the Nine Entertainment Group, although Peter Costello is a great mate of mine, but after what Fairfax did to me back in February, they can go and tell their story walking. I've told Peter that. I've told Hugh Marks. Came to my office to come down and ask me what the hell I was doing. I told him exactly what I was doing. So you'll see it now on Channel 7 at 4:30 on a Sunday afternoon, and you can see it on 7/2 at 8:30 on Saturday night. They also asked me if I would start to put some of the commitment we've got with News Corporation into the Fairfax papers. Anyway, after I'd thrown the age at Hugh, he's a pretty good ducker, I think, but anyway, they realised that we weren't going to give much revenue to them either. Some of our highlights there, I won't go through those, and I'm sure you will have read some of those in the presentations that we've put out. But you can see our wholesale brands, and I talked about these brands that we have that are out there selling product predominantly to our retail agents. Now, Qantas Holidays is a brand that we have until next year, 31st of March. We have a license that we acquired back in 2008 when the Qantas Holidays business merged into the JTG group. It was extended by 2 years in 2010 when Stella merged with JTG, and it runs out in 2020. So anyway, it was a license we weren't paying for. Alan decided he wanted a truckload of money for it. I decided not to give it to him. And we said, thanks very much, but you can have that back. And one of the things that actually we couldn't do was sell anything on the Qantas Holidays website, B2C. Now, as we've all noticed, I think B2C's probably increased quite a lot over the last decade or so. And we could not sell anything through that brand from a B2C perspective. So, and one of the conditions of the ongoing license, apart from a truckload of money, was you can only use it in the B2B format. So cheerfully we said, listen, thanks, but no thanks, and we've moved on, and a bit more B2C will be handy because we keep all the commission revenue. Not that we want to compete with our agents, of course, but if a bit sneaks in the door from time to time, we'll be quite happy about that. What's happening with our corporate business? Well, we've had some good wins there. I can also tell you that we have just picked up the News Corp account, including Foxtel, and that's been tremendous, except I now have to look after Boris's travel as well, which is going to be challenging. Paul Whittaker, boy, can you imagine looking after his travel? Anyway, for those of you who know him, he now runs Sky, previously the editor of The Australian. But we've got News Corp, we've got Foxtel transitioning in, and they should be transitioning in the next 6 to 8 weeks. Inspire, this is our Indigenous joint venture down the bottom here, and do we have a, yeah, there we go. Inspire Travel Management. This is a joint venture that we have with a number of Indigenous shareholders in this business, and it's picked up the Australia Post account, which is quite significant, and it's getting a lot of traction at the moment, particularly with the bigger mining companies and some of the bigger corporates as well, because quite a few of these corporates, led a lot by Twiggy and others, quite a few of these big corporates have actually committed to spending 3% of their procurement expenditures with Indigenous businesses in the coming years. And so if they spend the travel, which obviously they've got big travel accounts, 20, 30, $40 million, Inspire actually sits within the parameters that will include that expenditure as being within an Indigenously owned business. So we have a minority shareholding in it. We manage it and run it in partnership with our joint venture partners, but it's, as I said, it's really getting quite a bit of traction out there, which is great. APX, that's our corporate business in New Zealand, about 125 million in TTV, one of the 5 approved government contractors in New Zealand as well. Sorry? 3 minutes? Don't know what else. 3 minutes. I'd go for hours. Business. Okay. Technology. This is important. This is my 3 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to invest that in this technology investment. Helloworld. It's a mid-office platform for our retail networks. We're building it. It's our technology. We're utilising Salesforce platforms, using a product of theirs called Heroku to use those platforms to build this up. We're rolling it out across our agencies. Over 100 agencies have now signed up for it. I would expect by the end of 2021, we'll have between 500 and 600 of our travel agency members signed up onto this platform. Right? We've spent a lot of money on it. We're charging $75 per consultant per month. We have nearly 9,000 consultants across all of our networks and businesses. So we're not anticipating every single one of them signing up, but it is a very important development for us. You cannot get this system that we're building, which has got incredibly widespread support amongst our networks. You cannot get this system unless you're part of the Helloworld network. So apart from providing a better outcome for our agents in terms of productivity, better outcome in terms of efficiency, it also provides stickiness. You sign up to Helloworld, it's a great product. They all really do like it a lot. The feedback's fantastic. You want to leave Helloworld and go join some other network, not that there are many left, but if you want to do that, well, you can turn that off. Business expansion, business acquisition, you've seen what we've been doing there. You know the financial results, we published those some time ago, so I won't bother you with that. That's the only other slide I want to highlight, transactions and price trends. We've been publishing that now for the last 3 years, and you can see the impact in terms of transaction totals and price increases. And you get some sense as well as to the price elasticity for both the domestic and international markets. A lot of people are asking me about oil prices, where a ticket's going to go. Maybe they'll go up finally. I say finally because they've been going down for the last decade, but we would expect to see similar relationships, as you can see there. When there was a 6% increase in transactions, prices had dropped by 2%, and that's over the course of the 12-month period. So in any event, I can see everyone's looking at me to get out of the room, or certain people are. So I thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate your support of the business. Thanks to Bell Potter again for a great day, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.